All right, everybody, welcome to Real Truth. My name's Dan. We're exploring the truth and reality, what's really going on. Today, we're talking about a very exciting topic, coronavirus. That's what's really going on. But I want to review Dr. Thomas Cowan's book, The Contagion Myth, Why Viruses, including coronavirus, are not the cause of disease. Okay, so basically, we need to start with germ theory because that's what we all know, and that's what is common sense to people. I mean, how do we get sick? Somebody coughs. I breathe it in. The virus goes in. It starts attacking my cells. It invades my cells, takes over the cellular machinery to make copies of itself, sends those copies outside to infect other cells. My body creates this immune response. Send in the troops. So my killer T cells, my immune cells, they go on the attack. They identify infected cells, engulf or kill those cells, and try to eliminate the virus from my body. Thank God. Get that virus out of there. The whole process comes to fruition with antibodies. My body creates antibodies to remember the virus and make sure it cannot infect us again. So if the virus ever does come back in, my body's ready. It can immediately identify the virus and eliminate it before it can infect cells and make me sick. Okay? This just seems like common sense. Like, how can that be wrong? Well, Dr. Thomas Cowan presents a pretty compelling theory for why that might be not the case. Basically, let's start with why do we get sick, according to Dr. Cowan. So basically, it could be because you're not taking good care of your body. You're eating like shit. You're eating processed foods, which have lots of toxins in them, or you're not drinking enough water. It could be toxins in the air. You're breathing air with bad shit in it, getting in your body. Could even be a negative emotional mental state. Maybe you've been really hard on yourself. You're thinking negatively, or you're under a lot of stress. And he even says it could be electromagnetic radiation that's affecting your cells and causing damage. And so basically, the illness is the way for your body to detoxify, to clean out those infected cells. So let's go over some specific symptoms then. How does that work? Well, let's say you get sick. Excuse me. You have a runny nose. Maybe you have a cough. Maybe you're coughing up mucus. Or maybe you have a sore throat, inflammation of the throat. What your body is doing is cleaning out toxins from infected cells, and you produce thick mucus through which cellular debris and waste products from the detoxification is expelled. Now, Dr. Andrew Kaufman is another doctor who is basically theoretically identical in his beliefs. He talks about the swelling in your throat, which increases blood flow, which brings nutrients to the site and lets those waste products be taken away and sent to the liver and kidneys. On the issue of fever, Cowan says, one purpose of that is to elevate the temperature of the body, which he says partially liquefies the gels. He talks a lot about the crystalline structure of water and how water inside of our cells is in what he calls a fourth state of water. It's kind of like a jello. Anyway, the higher temperature partially liquefies the gel, allowing toxins to be flushed out through mucus or flushed out of your cells. So the role of the virus then could be to actually help your body get rid of those toxins. Or it could be a bacteria which is there to eat up the toxins. And Dr. Cowan gives a great analogy, like putting a dead squirrel in your compost pile. So if you put the dead squirrel in there, then obviously you're going to get flies, you're going to get maggots, you're going to get bacteria. But we wouldn't say the compost pile has an infection. Of course not. There's no infection. You've got these flies and maggots and bacteria to decompose, to get rid of the toxin or the dead body. Well, same thing when you get sick. Bacteria are there to clean up your cells. Okay, so what is a virus? He claims that viruses are actually exosomes. These are packages of genetic material which can be created by your own body. You don't have to get it from Susie across the street. No, you don't have to get it from somebody else. Viruses can be produced in your own body. Your body can actually produce them to help you detoxify, he says. Let's talk about in his own words. In his own words, quote, exosomes have exactly the same attributes as viruses. They are the same size, contain the same components, and act on the same receptors. Quote, when a living organism is threatened in almost any way, through starvation, chemical poisoning, or electromagnetic effects, the cells and tissues have a mechanism for packaging, propagating, and releasing these poisons. That mechanism being the virus. To be more succinct, the viruses are toxin-gobbling messengers that our cells produce to help us adjust to environmental assaults, including electrosmog. That's right, he goes 5G. He goes there. Now, we're going to get into that in just a minute. First of all, why may this theory be true, that it's not the virus that's the bad guy, but actually could be helping us? It's that our bodies needed to get sick to detoxify. Okay, let's go over some things that make us think that, yeah, maybe he's right. Okay, first, asymptomatic cases. These are cases where somebody has the virus but doesn't get sick. This first thing that should make you scratch your old head there. For COVID-19, it's said to be, estimates range 30% to over 50% of people who have it don't actually get sick. So how can we blame the virus if half the people who have the damn thing aren't sick? Obviously, at the very least, the virus is some kind of cofactor. It's something maybe involved in the illness, but not even maybe the main reason why we're getting sick. And other viruses, we see this for too, other illnesses. Like they say, only 1 in 10 people who have tuberculosis actually get sick. So 90% of people with tuberculosis, they don't get sick. For polio, it's ridiculous. It's like 95% of people with the polio virus don't get sick. So there has to be something else going on. And Dr. Cowan, of course, would explain that, yeah, just because you have the exosome or the virus doesn't mean you're going to get sick. You have to have a reason. Your body has to have a reason to use that virus to clean out the toxins from your cells. Okay, I get it. Okay. So what are we doing? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Dr. Kaufman or Dr. Cowan would explain that it's an exosome. You may have picked up through the air from someone else. It's possible. But equally as likely is that your body produced it on its own in response to a specific kind of toxin. Or you may have even picked it up through the body's interaction with other people's electromagnetic fields. Okay, so let's be honest here. We are electrochemical beings. What's the EEG for? What's the EKG? It's measuring electrical activity of the brain or the heart. Our bodies create electromagnetic fields which extend around our bodies. And they say these fields, these electromagnetic bodily fields, can extend up to about 5 yards or meters away from the body. So Dr. Cowan, interestingly, brings up a theory called resonance. Okay. There is actually experimental evidence for this, but the theory basically is that if I'm within those 5 yards of another person, our electromagnetic fields are, interacting, they're crossing. And there could be information exchange in that field. Okay, let's go to the experimental evidence. Nobel Prize winner, well, I think he's a Nobel Prize winner. Anyway, famous scientist Luc Montagnier, not sure how you say his name, but Montagnier is how I'm going to say it. He carried out an experiment in which he placed DNA or RNA into a beaker of water, beaker number 1, and he placed nucleic acids, the building blocks of DNA or RNA, in beaker number 2. And again, placed either DNA or RNA or either the building blocks of that in 2 different beakers across the room from each other. Okay. So he shined an energy source on beaker number 1 with the fully formed DNA or RNA. That was UV or infrared light energy he gave it. And in the other beaker of water, remember, was nucleic acids, the building blocks, which need to be arranged into the proper order, into the proper sequence to create the fully formed DNA molecule. What he found was that in time, the exact same sequence of DNA or RNA will form out of the raw materials in beaker number 2. And the only possible explanation is some form of energetic information transfer or resonance. Some signal is going from beaker 1 through the air, through the electromagnetic field that's connecting them, to beaker number 2 and informing those acids of how to arrange themselves into a specific sequence of DNA. Oh, it feels like we're getting woo-woo here, but scientifically based evidence here. Now, Dr. Cowan says viruses or exosomes are simply packages of DNA or RNA. They emit their own resonant frequencies. Okay? Therefore, you could have picked up the coronavirus frequency through connection with another person's electromagnetic field, which extends beyond the body, and your body subsequently made the exosome or virus in your own body using that information. And there's something that goes on in nature that is kind of similar. We need to talk about that. Trees can actually communicate with other nearby trees. Let's say there's a beetle infestation. Beetles are attacking and eating a tree. Well, that tree that's being attacked can somehow communicate with the surrounding trees, communicate information that there's beetles that are attacking, and then the other nearby trees will pump out a bug-repelling chemical to protect themselves from attack. So let's say there's a new toxin in our environment, and Sally's been exposed to it. So Sally's created the virus to help clean out the toxin. And I haven't been exposed to it yet, but I'm near Sally, near enough to where our fields are interpenetrating. And so Sally's information field sends information to my field that, hey, there's some bad shit in the air. You need to make this virus to prepare yourself in case you need it, in case you get overexposed to this toxin, whatever it is. And so my body's like, all right, thanks for the tip, Sally energetic field. And my body creates the exosome. Maybe I don't get sick right then, but my body's at least creating it to prepare for whatever's coming. So why do we have this pandemic at this point in time? How does Dr. Cowan explain the timing and what's really going on? Yes, 5Jizzle. That's where he goes. He goes the 5G route. And I know you're getting skeptical right now. You're like, no way, man. It can't be the 5G. We need it. Because I need 5G because don't you hate this? You want to download a video game, and it takes like 30 seconds to download the game. I can't wait that long. I've got to download my video games in 5 seconds or less, so I need 5G. Okay, take a sip of water. Okay, so here, Dr. Cowan explains that high-frequency electromagnetic fields like 5G can affect cell membrane permeability. That means it's easier for things to get inside of the cell, like other toxins, maybe. He also says that if it's transmitting at 60 gigahertz, it could affect our body's ability to absorb oxygen. That's a big problem. Now, obviously, 5G varies widely in frequency and scope. Some countries are implementing low or mid-band 5G, which uses frequencies of under 6 gigahertz. But there are very high frequency bands in the 20 plus gigahertz range and even higher frequencies possible. It's also important to keep in mind that some people will be more sensitive than others to these frequencies. Not everybody is going to get sick or have a problem with them, of course. So, he gives us a few correlations in his book that suggest a connection between 5G and the virus. First, there's Wuhan. We all know Wuhan's where the virus started. He says that 5G wireless was turned on in late September 2019 there, and there was a spike in cases in February, the same week that 5G was turned on for monitoring traffic. Then he goes on to Europe. He points out that areas with the densest 5G coverage in Europe have the highest case numbers, with northern Italy having 22 times the number of cases as in Rome. Okay, so he gives many more examples of the connection of 5G and where the virus is concentrated, basically. Now, we do have to be careful here because he could be biased. He could be cherry picking. I'm not accusing him of that. I'm not saying he is cherry picking, but let's be honest. You could go through the data and cherry pick, specific cases. Like I could go through the data and cherry pick maybe areas that don't have 5G yet and show that they have higher case numbers than maybe one or two areas that have 5G that just don't happen to have high case numbers. I could try and manipulate the data, cherry pick the data like that. So that's one question. If I talked to Cowan, I would ask him, why is the virus worldwide, even in places where 5G hasn't been implemented yet? Now, I'm not sure how he would answer that question, but it could be a case of resonance, like we talked about before. Maybe you're near someone who's been exposed to 5G, and his or her electromagnetic field communicates with your electromagnetic field, that there's a dangerous new radiation that your body should prepare for, and your body creates the virus. We talked about it, okay? One other line of reasoning that leads to a connection to 5G is that we can look at past outbreaks of disease and correlate them to past rollouts of some new kind of electromagnetic frequency being pumped through the air. Cowan goes through the history of electromagnetic rollouts, starting in the 1870s with the rollout of telegraph lines. At the time, he says, a new disease called neurasthenia, which doctors noted spread along the routes of telegraph and railroad lines, started increasing in cases. Symptoms often resembled a cold or the flu. Then we have the modern electrical era starting in 1889, which he correlates with flu pandemics, which followed in the years after. He talks about the year 1957 when radar was installed worldwide and correlates that with the Asian influenza pandemic. He goes through launching of communication satellites and connects those with pandemics, etc. Okay, you can read the book for the full story on that. In more recent times, though, we had 3G. Now, you could connect SARS with 3G. That timing is about right. Or 4G, you could connect with MERS, or possibly even H1N1. I think H1N1 might have been slightly before 4G really got going, but anyway. We do have to be careful with these kinds of correlations, though, because first, correlation does not equal causation. And with the case of SARS and MERS, those were very concentrated geographically. SARS was mostly in China. MERS, I think, started in Saudi Arabia and was pretty much confined to that Middle Eastern area. It didn't really go worldwide. There weren't many cases in SARS or MERS worldwide. It was pretty concentrated. That's not what you would expect if it was caused by 3 or 4G, because obviously that's worldwide. Everybody has 4G. So that makes it, maybe dubious to connect 5G. But then again, you could try and argue that, 3 and 4G, the frequencies weren't that much different than what we had been exposed to before, or just weren't at a high enough threshold to affect us enough. But 5G, the frequency has increased past a certain threshold where more people are going to be susceptible to its effects? Okay. Anyway, that's where he goes. He tries to say that, well, if there's a new virus, he actually explores a lot of the isolation of the virus and tries to show that they've never purified and isolated the virus correctly. They've obviously taken samples, fluid samples from the lungs of people who've had the virus, and they say they've isolated it, but he argues in the book that their isolation method was not perfect. There was other genetic material in their sample, which they got the genetic code from the virus from. I'm not going to go through all that. But yeah, basically, if there is a new virus, maybe it's because of this new thing that's affecting our bodies, this new toxin. Okay. So regardless of 5G, I do think his theory is very compelling. It makes sense of how so many people can be asymptomatic. It makes sense of my experience of, I think about, when do I get sick frequently, or when have I gotten sick frequently? Well, for me, a big thing is sleep. I remember one time when I just wasn't sleeping enough. I wasn't sleeping very much at all. Every day I was tired, and I got sick over and over because I wasn't sleeping enough. It could be because you're not eating right, or you have too much stress. We all know those are the times when we get sick. And why is that? Well, for instance, sleep is a time when our bodies repair and cleanse themselves. So if I'm not sleeping enough, my body doesn't have enough time to repair. It's gonna make me sick so that it can have time to repair. So the cold or flu is my body just telling me, hey, slow the fuck down, bud. You're not treating yourself right, and you need cleansing and repairing of your cells. So when I am getting plenty of sleep, when I am eating healthy, I don't get sick. I've noticed that. So Dr. Cowans' theory would align with that I could be breathing in flu or cold viruses all day long, but if I'm treating my body right, getting enough sleep, eating the right foods, I'm not going to get sick because my body doesn't need that exosome to clean myself out. Okay, I'm not going to go through everything in the book. I just wanted to lay out that theory for everybody. I think it really can help extricate us from this fear mentality that we need to fear our neighbor. Stay 6 feet away. Wear a mask. I got to protect myself. I'm scared. And we got to stay inside, and we got to lock down. Oh, Jimmy, don't open the door. I got to stay inside and protect myself. So there's this fear mentality that's really, I think that's toxic in itself. But his theory gives us hope that, we're not killing each other, basically. You're not dying because I coughed on you and you breathed in this dangerous virus. You're not getting sick necessarily from me or even from the virus. You're getting sick because your body needs to detoxify. And unfortunately, sometimes it can't detoxify. Sometimes it's too much and you die. But we don't need to fear each other because you're going to catch the virus. You're going to get sick if you need that illness, if you need that detoxification. In the book, though, Dr. Cowan also talks about, I mentioned this before, the crystalline nature of water in our bodies, why water is so critical to good health. He talks a lot about diet, how a good diet can help protect the gut lining, which can prevent toxins from getting into the bloodstream. It can enhance the proliferation of beneficial bacteria. That's very important. And one thing I really like about the book is that he goes through a lot of the what ifs, because I was asking myself that too. I was like, well, not the what ifs, but the what abouts. So what about smallpox? We all know the Europeans brought smallpox to the New World, and then the Native Americans got smallpox and it killed a bunch of people. Wasn't that a contagious disease? Oh, Dr. Cowan has an answer. He goes through in the book what was really going on, in his opinion, why the Native Americans got sick. You might also ask about, what about sexually transmitted diseases? You have sex with somebody with the bacteria, you get it, you get sick. How do you explain that, Dr. Cowan? Well, you can find that information out in the book. I really highly recommend it. Whether or not you agree with him, one of the great things about the book is that it's fully sourced. He cites his sources. You can go look up in the back where he got that information from, whether it's a scientific study. You can go look at the scientific study or some website. You can go and look at the information and decide for yourselves. Okay, so one big question I would present to Dr. Cowan if I get the chance to interview him, which I have asked for a podcast. We'll see how that goes. One big question I would present is, what about measles? That's the one case where it seems evident to me that the vaccine did work, because we went from having 3 to 4 million cases in children of measles down to, after the vaccine, after widespread coverage, we dropped down to the tens of thousands. And then today, there might be an average of 100 cases a year in the U.S. So how is that possible if the virus doesn't cause the disease in the first place? Because vaccines are predicated on germ theory. We inject somebody with the weakened form of the virus, and their body can recognize that, create antibodies, and protect them from getting sick with that disease. And that's what we see, is we don't see kids with measles anymore. The vaccine worked. How is that possible if the virus isn't the problem in the first place? Well, I don't know how he would answer that, but one interesting thing he does suggest is that the body likely creates a chemical or protein that we call an antibody to mark this event, where this event means the illness. So in his view, the antibody is not there to protect us against anything, but to signal that we have gone through that particular detoxification process. Therefore, the body won't go through it again or anytime soon, depending on the virus. We all know a cold or flu we can get 6 months later or a year later, but some viruses like measles or chickenpox, we get it once and we're immune for life. So he describes measles as a normal childhood illness, a process of detoxification, transformation, and growth. And he rightfully points out there is some scientific evidence that if you get a disease naturally, like the measles or chickenpox, and recover as a child, you're less likely to have cancer or other diseases later in life. The rates are lower. So basically, he talks about measles as like a normal part of the growth and maturation of the immune system and of growing up. And Dr. Cowan doesn't really state this, but here's what I infer based on what Dr. Cowan says. So vaccination is kind of like tricking the immune system. So here's what I think might be going on, according to his theory. You inject the virus directly into somebody's blood. Then your body sees the virus and your body is tricked into thinking, oh, the body has gone through the measles illness. Okay, because this virus couldn't be floating around if we hadn't gone through the disease. So then the body makes an antibody to mark this event, to mark that, hey, we've gone through that disease, we've detoxified, and we don't need to go through it again. So the antibody basically prevents you from getting the measles because it's tricking your body into thinking you already had the measles. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Okay, so we should really wrap this up here. Dr. Cowan does actually spend time in the book explaining vaccines, and a lot of it's about the early vaccines, and he goes through the history of like the first vaccines, and and tries to show that a lot of vaccines, especially early on, didn't actually work. Some very interesting details in there about that. So I'm going to let you get the book. I do recommend it. And yeah, give me your thoughts and comments below. I'm going to check out of here. This is Dan from Real Truth. Have a good night.